Hey folks, thanks for joining us for another Students for Political Engagement interview. Tonight, I'm joined here with Matthew and Jacqueline interviewing YRDSB Trustee candidate Sadra Nasseri. Welcome. So why don't we begin by you introducing yourself to everyone?
First of all, I want to say thank you very much for having me for this interview. My name is Sadra Nasseri. I am one of the two candidates running for the position of York Region District School Board Trustee for Richmond Hills Wards 3, 5, and 6. I'm also a political consultant, community volunteer, and a resident of Ward 5 since 2016. I'm not only the youngest candidate in Richmond Hill, but I'm possibly the youngest municipal candidate in the entirety of York Region as well. I'm very much looking forward to this interview.
Great, that's amazing. So our first question has to do with the school board and the YRDSB budget. So as with any school board, the finances of YRDSB is a critical part of its operation. So what is your idea about how the YRDSB budget should be crafted in order to ensure both financial stability while also preserving the quality of education?
So I'm not sure how much you guys are aware, but for this operating year's budget, the YRDSB is in a $29 million deficit. The board decided to use 2% of their operating reserves to get rid of this deficit within a 2-year time span, which was eventually approved by the Ministry of Education. But the ministry told this to the board in a letter dated August 25 that this practice is not sustainable for the long term. I support this for this next year because we need to get rid of that deficit, as school boards are, it's not like the provincial or federal government, they cannot run deficits. But I think that we need to get rid of the deficit within 2 years, but we need to do it in a way that, as little cuts as possible are made, like the board decided to do for the next school year's budget. But I'm always also in support of students and educators getting as many supports as possible. But at the end of the day, we need to be fiscally responsible. That's how it should go.
Okay, and as a follow-up to that, do you think there are any budget items specifically that you would look at including or excluding when the budget is crafted?
What do you mean by that? Is it stuff that we can get rid of? Like what's the specifics you're
I think like, are there any programs that you think could have more money dedicated to them? Are there programs that you think have too much money spent on them, like those sorts of things?
So talking to residents, not just across Richmond Hill, but across York Region, they have told me that the board at the present time has a shortage of ECEs, which are, support workers. I think if we had the money, we should hire more ECEs for the board. And there are some other proposals that I have that I think we'll get into it in later questions, that if we have the money for it, we can also do. But the priority firstly should be to balance the budget.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And I think the next question is on how the school board interacts with teachers. So as you may know, the YRDSB, as well as other school boards in Ontario, has seen a shortage of teachers in recent years. And what do you think the Board of Trustees and the YRDSB by extension could do to alleviate the problem?
Very good question. In the beginning of the campaign, I was speaking to some parent council representatives from schools under my area, and the chair of Langstaff Secondary Schools Council told me that they have a shortage of computer science teachers because they can't find anybody to teach a class like that. And I thought to myself, I said, why can't the YRDSB hire people who have practical experience in the computer science sector, for example, to be able to teach those classes? Because this has been done before. Last year, so 2021, 2022, around the January time period, both the YRDSB, TDSB, and a bunch of other school boards, they went and they hired this role called emergency supply teachers. Pretty much this was people who were not, certified teachers, but they had to fill this role. In this instance that I said, I think that, as somebody who has experience working for, I don't know, companies such as Google or Apple can teach the concepts of the computer science class just as well as somebody who is a registered teacher for that. Because most teachers that we have a lot of math teachers, we have a lot of science teachers, but when you get to certain subjects, the number of teachers just comes down and down and down. So I think that's a way to alleviate some of the pressures that is on the YRDSB right now when it comes to teacher shortages.
Thank you. Just a kind of a follow-up. A lot of these people who do currently have experience with, like, as you've mentioned, like Google or like Amazon, often are working in a job that either they kind of like or they presume are paying them well. So kind of like, what are the incentives for these people to go into teaching, for example, rather than working at Google?
My view on this is that, we all know as well, computer science is the future. Computer technology, all of this is the future. They if they want to promote it to the next generation, they want to ensure that we get more computer scientists, we get more computer engineers in the future. This might be an incentive to them, but at the same time, if they truly have a good experience, it's going to be the same amount of pay, because we know that teachers who typically are there for like 10-15 years, their pay is around $100,000 pretty much, here and there. And that's the same amount that a lot of these computer engineers earn, mainly at smaller companies, but that's still the same amount at the end of the day. And welcome, Rishi, by the way, you just popped in.
Right, yeah, thank you. Sorry, I was having connection issues. So Richmond Hill, of course, is a fairly diverse city, and this is obviously reflected in our schools, which have all sorts of different kinds of people from different parts of the world, or with families from different parts of the world. In particular, there are many immigrants who attend our schools. So what would you, as YRDSB trustee, do to promote diversity in our schools and make sure all those who attend our school feel welcome and included?
I want to be a trustee who listens to everybody's voices, listens to everybody's concerns. I've already made the commitment of answering all inquiries that might, parents might send my way within a 2-day time period, whether it's phone calls, whether it's emails. And also I've made the other commitment of having 2 annual meetings with every single school council that of the schools under my jurisdiction, which I'm not sure if you've seen the area, it's a lot of schools, because I want everybody to make sure to know that I'm here to serve them, and I'm here to make sure that their kids get the best quality of education in the YRDSB.
All right, thank you.
Yes, and on the next question, as you mentioned, of the quality of education in the York Region District School Board, Richmond Hill and York Region's population is growing in recent years, and it has grown for a very long time. And as the population is growing, more students are entering our schools. So what do you think could be done to maintain the quality of education within our schools for all students as more people come in?
So at the moment, across my area, there is a noticeable problem with certain high schools mainly being too overcrowded. I'll give you the examples. Alexander Mackenzie High School is where I went, and it was very overcrowded the last year before the pandemic hit. Why? Because you would get students from both wards 4 and 5 going to Alex Mac. I assume you guys know the boundaries because you guys are politically involved. But then you have Bayview Secondary School that you would get students from wards 3 and 6 going there. And then you would get an overcrowded school that forces the school administration to cut elective classes to make sure everybody could get the required courses. Now, I have two proposals. One is short term and one is long term because it's going to take much longer. Number one is redrawing the boundaries of Langstaff Secondary School. Langstaff Secondary School, unlike the other secondary schools in the area, is undercrowded. I think the last time somebody told me it had 400 students, which compared to Alexander Mackenzie and Bayview is very low. If we can redraw the boundaries, we can alleviate some pressure, mainly from Alexander Mackenzie, because you would typically get students that live in Ward 5 going there. Now, number two is advocating for development of a new high school in Ward 6. Because Ward 6 has 4 elementary schools and has no high schools, while Ward 5 has 3 elementary schools and technically 2 high schools. The current provincial government in their re-election campaign said that they will build schools, and I think with some advocacy and with some outreach to them, I think the newest YRDSB school can be built in Ward 6.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. Just a quick follow-up. You mentioned about distributing or alleviating pressure from overcrowding by perhaps moving students from, just an example, Alexander Mackenzie to Langstaff. But is there any real incentive for parents to, drive their students for an extra 10, 20 minutes to the other school when they have the choice to stay at their existing school?
I think you kind of misunderstood, because what I was saying is we redraw the boundaries for elementary school students. Because the high school students that are already there, will already be there. But for elementary school students, for students who graduate from grade 8, if their best choice at that time is Langstaff, they should go to Langstaff, because other schools are just way too overcrowded. I don't know how big of a problem this was in RHHS where you guys go, but certainly where I went, this was a big problem, and I really do not want to wish it upon anybody.
All right, thank you for the answer.
And yeah, so I think Jacqueline has the next question.
Yes, thank you. So an important job of the Board of Trustees is to craft policies that govern all YRDS schools, or at least review them. So what do you think that this process should be conducted? And are there any policies that you would consider updating or adding as a trustee?
So in terms of how this process should be conducted, I think there should be more unity among trustees, because there are certain policies that might benefit students, but at the end of the day, it gets voted down because a lot of trustees decide to vote against it. The main role of a trustee is to serve students and parents, we need to make sure that we work together to pass policies that are the best for students' well-being and student success throughout their time at YRDSB. Now, when it comes to what policy I would mainly consider updating, I have indicated in my platform that I want to do more with regards to, getting rid of students vaping and smoking in schools, because I think the current policy is not effective at all. Because you would get students who would, I'm sure you guys know this, would go to the washrooms and they would just be there for 20 minutes and they would vape there. Not only they harm their own health, but they bother their peers that might come in and use the washroom and don't smoke. And most importantly, they're missing instructional time. So I would certainly consider updating that. That is my number one priority, and it will be my number one priority if I get elected.
Thank you. Just to follow up a bit on this specific, your first priority, what would the new policy look like, and what do you think is bad about the current policy? Just to go a little bit more into detail.
Oh, all right. This goes back to the second question when I said it's gonna come back. I think that we should try and maybe install some vape detectors in washrooms as it's been done in the US. Like this has been done. And we can start at one school and we can test it out for a while. Because what happens is some of these vape detectors, it goes and sends a message to the staff, causing the staff to be aware of, somebody is vaping in the washroom. But on the other hand, I want to if I get elected, I want to hear what my colleagues on the board of trustees think about this. I'll tell them, write your ideas on a piece of paper and let's create a policy that we can all agree benefits the students.
Okay. I was just wondering about a specific detail that you mentioned in there, which is the vape detectors, and I might not be as clear about this, but I think what is sort of like the difference between vape detectors and smoke detectors?
Okay, so vape detectors, as far as I know, and I've done my research, it it detects that special smoke that comes out of vapes, because what comes out of vapes is not what really like the regular smoke is. It's made out of different compounds and whatever. I don't want to get too sciencey because quite frankly I'm not good at it, but it's able to detect vape smoke. That's pretty much the main difference from a regular smoke detector, because if somebody like right now vapes in their home, the smoke detector doesn't go off because it doesn't detect a vape smoke. But if somebody in their house has a vape detector, it's gonna go off. Simple as that.
All right, thank you for that answer. And I guess that concludes our interview here. Thank you so much for, spending time with us, talking to us. This is all greatly appreciated.
Thank you guys for having me. It was a great interview, and just wish you the best of luck in your next series of interviews with
Thank you.
candidates.